knowing the fact that you won the Bakgyamni Prize, and unfortunately you couldn't come to Korea, but you got to say something to Korean readers.
I think it's one of the most exciting things that's happened to me, and it was completely unexpected. And I had this sort of heap of letters, and I opened 3 or 4, and then suddenly there was this extraordinary letter saying you have won the prize. And I took it to my husband and I said, look at this, look at this.
Oh, I won something.
But partly because of Yeonbom, I've always cared about Korea. So then I read the novel of the lady the prize is named for. What is her name?
Bakgyongni.
Yeah, Bakgyongni. And I really was very impressed by that. I was going to ask you, am I allowed to ask you a question?
No problem at all.
What I read in English of her book is very cut down, because I gather it's 11 books, and it reads cut down. Do you think they will do it longer? It's very exciting, but it's frustrating to read because you can feel somebody cutting and cutting and cutting.
Very artificially.
I think it's been done quite well. How can I tell? But you keep reading. But I must stop talking about this. I have this dreadful feeling that I would know all these characters in immense depth and complexity, and instead it's rushing along in order to cut it down and to keep going. Anyway, it's very, very interesting.
So maybe there are some kind of something in common between Bakgyongni, the Korean author, and you as a female writer, is talking about the human value of life and the love of nature. So I was listening to some of your interview that is posted on YouTube. So you're talking about like some kind of your feminist perspective of being a novelist. What do you think about that?
I'm very troubled by feminism because I've always felt I want to be a writer, not a woman writer. Although I was sitting here last night feeling ill and thinking about your questions, and I thought, who are the British writers I really love? And in fact they're women. Or at least, well, there's Dickens, but also George Eliot, Jane Austen.
Very popular in Korea too.
Iris Murdoch?
Yeah, I heard of her too.
It's, it's very good to be... I spend a lot of time in France, and the French don't have this sense of men and women all writing. It's odd if the women write, and when they write about women. Whereas we've always had great women writers who write about everything, and this is what. Hurrah for George Eliot.
That you have long been a renowned writer worldwide, but originally you were an academic researcher, right? So there are some curiosity from Korean audience that once being an academic scholar and now became a very well-known writer. So you kind of switched your position to write and think over the social issues. So this whole transformation of your perspective and position, how does it affect the way you write your stories?
I think I'm fortunate to be as old as I am, because when I started reading and writing, there wasn't this sense of the professional critic in the same way. So if I taught the books. And I used to teach, I think this was immensely important to me, I used to teach extramural university teaching. I taught adults, and they all had degrees in different things. They weren't people who were professional students of literature. and I taught them the books as the books were written by people like Dickens and George Eliot and Henry James for readers. And so I didn't have this sense, which I think was very good for me, I didn't have this sense of the study of literature as a profession in the same way as it is now, or as it was when I was teaching. I came to be a teacher. I taught American literature by sheer accident. I was given a scholarship to go to America after Cambridge, and the scholarship required me to be studying American literature, which was not what interested me. I care about European literature, but I got interested in American literature.
Anyway.
Yes, well, things are interesting.
Right.
But I'm still not an American specialist, really. I find the Americans much more alien than the Europeans.
Alien? What do you mean by that? I'm very curious.
Well, alien. They're very obsessed with being American.
Oh, yeah. Parochial, can live, narrow down interest to define who they are.
Narrow and deep.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it was trivial, but it's narrow compared to either the British or the French and the Germans and the Italians. I ought to read the Italians more, but I don't.
That actually makes me think the way in which, like in terms of the comparisons between some kind of a soil of literatures in Europe and in America. In Europe, maybe England is surrounded by many rich country of culture, based on long history of whatever, multiple diversification based on, probably some say imperialism, some say colonialism, whatever. But in America, they have been struggling over how to define who they are.
Exactly.
To get away from the European heritage.
No, that's exactly how they are. And they're both fascinating and maddening. But I'm trying to think. I did love Moby Dick.
Moby Dick?
Yeah. I loved some of the big 19th century American novels, which were still, well, they weren't European, but they weren't so busy being American. I think.
So what if, if I'm asking, how do you feel, so maybe I can ask, how lucky you are being a British writer with a very universalified mean of expression like English. So.
I think you're absolutely right. And as I get older, and I keep getting older and older, I'm more conscious of the fact that I'm very, very lucky. I'm trying to think when it occurred to me I was very lucky simply to have the English language as a beginning, because I started thinking in English, and then I was good at languages, so I can think in French and I can sort of think in German and Italian, and this means I can see English from two, which is very good. I don't live inside English only, and it makes you see just how wonderful English is. And of course, this again, for some reason I keep coming back to George Eliot. She had languages. She knew Spanish, she knew French, she knew German. She could think in those languages, whereas Dickens didn't. Dickens thought in English, and he thought language was English. And he was a great master of English, but it was different. And George Eliot was a European.
Yes.
Strange, really, because she was a provincial woman from a very narrow background, very religious.
As a woman as well.
And a woman as well, and an ugly woman. Which probably was good for her, because... But, so, anyway, she's caused a lot of my thinking about being English and British. I tend to think about English, not British. I think sometimes the two together,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes the English are narrowly English as opposed to Scottish or Welsh or Canadian or American.
Oh, so it's Commonwealth language.
Mm. And
British.
yes, I very rarely think about being British. I think about being English, and as I'm speaking to you about being English, there are sort of visual images that come into my mind, images of plants and landscapes.
Yeah. That's more like a European perspective. Like English is not belong to people living in the UK. Maybe English is already internally mixed up with all different languages from different places in Europe.
And it's, of course, it's made up of all different languages.
Yeah.
They all get into English.
Contributing to each other. Like.
And we're quite good at taking over languages.
Great.
Borrowing words.
Yeah. Good. I don't think you have been pretty conscious about like when you're writing books that I have to define my book somehow in terms of British nationals. Like my book should be about like British national kind of based concern. Probably you was writing what you want to write, but it ended up being probably interpreted by the critic and reader that, oh, your book of writing is too much like British or English. You know, what do you think about it?
No, I think that's a very accurate description of the state of affairs. I think I started writing because the thing I care about is language. When I think about the meaning of words or words that describe things in the lands, I get very excited and I think about language. I don't think about being British at that level. It doesn't occupy my mind in the same way. I mean, anybody with a good mind writing in English will think about Britishness and Englishness, and I do. But I don't think politically. I write novels because I'm not political. I write novels because human beings are complicated and difficult, and endlessly different from each other, as well as the same as each other in unexpected ways. And I enjoy that. I mean, I enjoy it more than anything. But there's a whole generation of women younger than me that are writing because they want to define what it is to be a woman and to make a place for women in society. And this is good too. I mean, this is necessary, but it isn't what I do or did or started out. And every now and then I find myself, as you were saying, getting described as though that is what I'm trying to do. And
so yeah, actually what you just said makes me think about like one part of the way you write story is about, you know, being intuitive. Like you have your own keen eye to look and find some truths of human lives. But at the same time, you are doing tremendous amount of work to research things that you have to deal with in your books and with a lot of notes in your novels. So it is also like some mixture of different two elements in working out some books.
Both of its life. But when I was really very young, if I found a reference to a book in a book, I would read a second book. And when I read Coleridge's Ancient Mariner and read the scholarship on it, it's
I love it too.
It's one of the things I love most in the world. But Coleridge did that. If he found anything in a book he was reading about another book.
Right.
He read the other book, and then
he was a critic too.
Yeah,
as a writer.
exactly. And those are the writers I love, really, the ones who are critics as well as writers.
Exactly.
And there isn't a difference. I mean, The Ancient Mariner is one of the most dramatic poems in any language, and yet it is a scholarly work written by a man who read an enormous amount and used it, and gosh, it makes me really happy just to think of Coleridge. It's yes, I feel that they're mentors rather than objects of study.
Right.
In the end, and I feel in some humble way one is having a dialogue with Coleridge. And one isn't exactly saying, "Oh yes, how clever of you," but I don't do that. I don't think of him writing when I read him, but I think of his writing. There is Iris Murdoch. When I met Iris Murdoch's novels first, I was a postgraduate, really. And an ex-boyfriend sent me an Iris Murdoch, and he said, "I think you would like this," and he was dead right, I did. And I couldn't understand why her novels were the shape they were. So I did a lot of work on her, and I read all her philosophy and things in order to find out how her mind worked, because that was how my mind worked. And then I got to meet her. That was terrifying. That was awful. And then we became friends, but it was...
What do you mean by the awful when you met her? Like...
Well, she said she was a book, she wasn't a person.
Okay.
And there she was at a bar, and she drank an awful lot of brandy, I think it was. And she kept putting brandy in the other drink, and she was very nice. She gave me, that isn't it, but she gave me one of these glass balls. Which I'm obsessed by. And she didn't know that. That isn't the one she gave me, which is upstairs, but it's the same size and the same colours. And it was rather wonderful. There she was in this bar, with this huge glass. And she handed me this round, beautiful glass ball.
Wow.
So I got it.
Handmaiden? Handmaiden, like...
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Very colourful.
There's got hundreds of them. Those are just the beginning of the collection.
That's what you mean by like being obsessed with those stuff.
I like them because they're all the same and they're all different.
Yeah.
And that's like the writing.
Yeah. They look the same, but inside they have a difference. Collecting.
They're beautiful things.
4 is about the kind of rivalry relation between the American scholar and British scholars, especially in your book, A Possession,
Oh, yes.
compete against each other to reach the truth of
Yes, we found Peter found the film that was made of Possession last night, which I'd completely forgotten, because I'm worried about films of my books. My books are my books. But it was much better than I remembered. We had it on the television and it was very badly cut. There was something I was going to say that... Oh yes, of course, it was an American film. So Roland, who is an archetypal Englishman, he was an American.
Oh, in the film?
In the film.
Oh.
And he isn't bad. He's the right man with the wrong accent.
Okay.
And he's got the same kind of shyness and nervousness. And everybody thought I would hate him when the film came out. But actually I didn't. I thought he understood exactly what he was doing and what sort of character he was.
I see.
But there were other people who I didn't like. Now I can't remember who they were. But... it's a very frightening thing having films made. Have they filmed Pak?
Bakgyonglis, yes, there are some drama, not a 2-hour-long film, because it's a serial books with a bunch, many books. So there is some TV drama that appeared in the late 1980s and 1990s. So I saw some episode when I was young, but not entirely though. Yeah. So anyways, what do you think about is there any sense of a competition among the different American and British scholars?
I think there increasingly is. The scholars rather than the writers. The Americans on the whole assume they are better.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, they just know they are the Americans and you can come along behind. And some of the British know that they're Europeans and that our culture is much older and much less narrowly nationalistic.
Right.
And some don't. And it's okay because nowadays we all travel constantly in aeroplanes and we go and visit each other's universities.
Yes.
A friend of mine, a wonderful novelist called Neil Mukherjee.
Oh,
Do you know Neil? I mean, he's just rung up to say he can't come today, which
I could see the list of the guests invited and the name. Neil Mukherjee there.
You should read his books if you haven't, because he's terribly good.
Okay.
But he's interesting. How did I get on to Neil?
Teaching in America.
Yes, he's teaching at Princeton at the moment, and he's like me. He's a perfectly good academic,
And also a writer.
and also a perfectly good writer. And he doesn't find it a difficulty,
Okay.
but he notices how much more a thing you've been talking about, how much more defined the academic culture is in the two countries. When I was in America, which is a long time ago now, the degree of their lack of interest in Europe,
You're surprised.
I was really surprised. I think it still exists, but less because of the aeroplanes and the fellowships, and you have people like Neil turning up, who is in fact Indian from Calcutta,
Yeah.
teaching in Princeton, and that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he can locate what you were talking about, absolute local things in pieces of writing about England or America or Calcutta. It's interesting actually, because when I began to think about your questions, I was thinking about what had changed and what was academic, what was I about to say, and I had begun by producing a kind of cliche that everything had to be more generalised because people didn't know the difficult words and the local words. But it isn't true. People learn them. People read books and they learn the words, which, in the case of the British, includes the American words. You know, we learn them, we know what they are. Americans are so difficult because the ones who know English literature know it better than anybody does. But anybody else doesn't know anything. Yes. I can see Zoe nodding. It's a very weird feeling because if they know it, they know it.
Sometimes I try to imagine myself put in your shoes, like, as a great writer living in England, what about you traveling around the world, go to some places or speaking English in their own ways, It seems like they are all unified, in terms of speaking English, But at the same time, there are a lot of differences, like cultural and political and social, with a different accent as well. So,
it's terribly exciting.
yeah.
I mean, once you start thinking about it, it's endlessly varied and endlessly exciting.
Yeah.
And if you are English like my parents were, you have this on a very small scale. They lived in Yorkshire towns, and if they went to Lancashire, it was a different language.
Yeah.
It was a different
Right.
group of people, and you spread that out into Europe.
Yeah.
And there were the French and the Germans, and then of course there was war. When war makes war changes everything.
Yeah. You look so sad when saying war.
Well, I was thinking about, after the war, and the sense that the whole world had gone somehow and was having to be rebuilt. And it was a world I had inherited, but I hadn't had time to have lived in it. Whereas now I'm old, I also lived through the war, so I think about the war. But in the war...
Do you still have a vivid memory of war here in England?
Yeah, oh yes, very strongly.
So you were born in 1936?
Yes.
So you remember, for example, World War II in like at the age of 10 or something like that. Yeah.
And I remember, you know how you have 5 or 6 memories, I say 5 or 6, there are memories of times in your life that you never forget. And
Never go away.
And the thing that I never forget is my father, who joined the Air Force.
Oh.
And he joined the British Air Force before the war began.
Oh.
He knew there would be a war, and he joined. And I remember we had to move house because we lived in Sheffield, which was a big industrial city, and it was going to be badly bombed, and it was badly bombed. And we went to a little new house in Pontefract, which is where Richard II was killed, which I didn't know at the time. But I remember standing on the stairs, and my father was standing inside the door, and he was surrounded by these khaki bags. No, not khaki,
Like
blue, Air Force blue.
Ah, I see.
And they were all different shapes, and so at least that's how I remember it. And he was completely different because he had a different hat on, and he had these clothes.
Right.
Then he went. He just wasn't there. And I became a person without a father.
Oh, so sorry for that.
Yeah, I wasn't at the time because everybody hadn't got a father, you know. It was just like that.
Yeah.
People's fathers went away, and at least mine came back. And much later, I discovered that there's some wonderful photographs. I think I've got them. He got a holiday of about a month when he was working as a Air Force lawyer in Italy. And he just travelled around Europe. There are pictures of him sitting on rocks and looking at lakes. Being a European in a way we just weren't, because we were stuck in England. And now I find it interesting. But then I found it terribly repressive, all this, as though there was a life that I wasn't having because of this war. And I hated Hitler for mucking my life up. I've started reading a biography of him written by somebody who doesn't dislike him quite enough. This is quite a nice feeling, actually, because you have a sense that he was somebody. which you do need. Because we just had this monster. Have I written about the Hitler Humpties?
Hitler Humpties?
You know Humpty Dumpty?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Oh, I see. It's kind
when I was a little girl,
yeah.
we used to make Humpties out of eggshells. And they all had his...
Right.
And then we would throw stones at them. I'm not sure I've ever really written that up, but it
Kind of a war
it
education.
really was part of my life. This solemn making of works of art that you could
Interesting.
look like Hitler, and then
Yeah.
London for a very long time was still like the war. I mean, they didn't mend things very quickly. The houses were broken.
Yeah.
Everything was bombed. I mean, there was still bomb damage all around when I was teaching at University College in the 1980s. There were houses around the college that were bombed and not yet repaired.
Oh, I see.
I'm trying to remember, which you don't really need to know. There's a terribly good novel about children in the war.
So I just quote a sentence from an article that I read. It goes like this. Victorian crisis of faith resulting from the loss of religious certainty in the face of scientific discoveries. So it's the title of the article is about like lost in faith, something like that. You know, this is part of the way he argues that you kind of find in the modern British cultures. Like, and also you try to say something about the contemporary American British cultures by adopting some scenes from the Victorian age. You know, to talking about the modern, you needed the past.
Yes, because the past, the modern came from the past, and was totally changed by, and of course, the other way around too. The modern changes the past.
Oh, the reconstruction of the
You
past.
understand the past quite differently when you understand the present, which you don't, but you can try. I think, again, I keep trying to remember when I was a girl, you know, first reading, and one looked for people's emotions, you looked for people's relationships with each other. Does she really love him? Does he really respect her? And then bit by bit you get to see them in the whole culture. And when you realise you're doing this, it's very exciting as a kind of student. Oh, this is good interview. It's caused me to start thinking again. But I was feeling so ill, I couldn't think at all. And I'm terribly worried by the word feminist.
Oh, yeah. I understand.
I think you're right. But I am of a generation older than the generation that took banners and flags and marched out into society and said, I am a feminist.
Like a suffrage movement.
My mother, much more than me, was a feminist. She was a working class woman and she went to Cambridge from a Yorkshire grammar school.
Wow, intelligent.
And she was a feminist and a socialist.
Oh, radical.
Really radical, yes. She was just unfortunately so bad-tempered that it was quite difficult, but she was a victim of modern society because modern society said she stayed in the kitchen. When I
I'm very sympathetic with the woman from that generation.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yes, I'm very sympathetic, and at the same time it drove me mad. No, I am totally sympathetic. It was a dreadful... So I tend to think life out in stories, as you will have noticed. There was a dreadful day when my father was made a Queen's Counsel, which meant we went up to London from Sheffield, and he went to the Houses of Parliament, and he wore a long wig and long black gowns.
Like a judge.
Yeah. He became a judge and he wore such a wig. And he looked beautiful. But my mother stood in the kitchen grumbling and saying, here I stand in the kitchen, and there he is in a wig in the Houses of Parliament. And she was right, really.
I see.
And I suppose my generation of women, bit by bit, we've made spaces in which it's just as likely that we will have the wig. And that's a huge step forward.
Right.
And I don't think I did anything at all to help it, but I am grateful for it.
Yeah, thanks to her, we created more room to move around. Yeah.
We've created a better world in some ways. I've just remembered what it was I was going to tell you about the Germans. I was terrified of them. I mean, you would be if you were a child of the war. And I remember the first time I went to Germany. I was a postgraduate. And I got on a train in Holland to go across Germany.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there surrounded by Germans. And a child in me was terrified of the Germans, and I kept looking at them and thinking, there's bloody Germans.
The language itself has spoken to you.
And then there was a really awful man in any nationality, and he suddenly said, Die Engländer sind alle große Verbrecher.
I can feel the sound of the language that you're speaking.
The English are all great criminals, and everybody else, and this was interesting about the Germans, everybody else was appalled that he said this. They were terribly nice to me. They gave me sandwiches and cake, and so it was that's one of the things I shall never forget, like my father putting his clothes on to go into the war. I shall never forget that German train. And now I have lots and lots of really good friends who are Germans. And poor old Germans.
Yeah.
A lot of them weren't the enemy. Well, they were the enemy. We were talking about it last night. We went to my little granddaughter's 8th birthday party, and we were sitting around with my son-in-law and my daughter and the little girl talking about Germans. Don't know how we got on to Germans. But he's coming today, I think. He's very interesting because he's very much from the north of England.
Then number 5, somehow you covered this.
We've done that one.
Yeah, like something that you try to portray in your work, something beyond simply being realistic. Like you somehow repudiate the notion of realism in writing stories.
Yes.
So if there is something more than just simply remaining realistic, then how would you define it in your words?
It's there in the language, really. Realistic novelists use a certain vocabulary which describes things and social actions. But my sort of person uses the language of philosophy and the language of religion. I mean, I'm totally irreligious, but nevertheless I know about religion. And I think those languages are part of the way the world is, and the novel should be. Well, my novels should be. I think there are very good narrowly social novels, but I don't want to write one.
So
I used to say, if you really want to change people's lives, you go out and teach. You don't write novels. But I'm not sure that's true.
So there are certain language that is not fully covered by simply language of portraying reality, in a very spiritual. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
My immediate response, which I will tell you because it's interesting, was that it's very dangerous. It's dangerous if you fall in love.
Yeah.
It's dangerous if you love somebody too much. It's dangerous if it stops.
Yeah. I see. As a married man, I can sense what you're saying.
You see what I mean? And also, I was thinking this morning, I've been married an awful long time and here I am, very contented, and how improbable that is, really. But the other thing about love is that when people are in it, it is all. And they get completely carried away by love.
Yes.
And love is who they are, and who they are is love.
Yes.
And there is this, I think Harris actually said, there is a wonderful moment when you fall out of love. And suddenly you're not in love, but the whole of the world exists again. And I love that. I love that feeling that the world isn't just love.
Interesting.
And it's, I think, one of the things I most love about writing novels is describing a world which is more than just love. And so many novels are just love. And very good novels are just love. But the things that aren't love and still exist, if you're a human being, it's so surprising that we're capable of being so interested in so much. I think that's what I like about human beings. You give them a plant or a rabbit or an idea of history, and they go and find out about it. Whereas there was a horrid great cat going round and round my swimming pool this morning. It was just thinking about how to get to the next place. It wasn't. And I looked at it and I felt a certain amount of envy because I felt so ill and it was. But anyway, that's what I think about love.
Yeah, very lucky.
I've been happily married. It's a second marriage, and like many people, you do it wrong once,
Yeah.
and then you do it right,
Right.
and that has been very, very good, and I love the children
Learning through love.
and the grandchildren.
Yeah.
I was good. I was quite good at being a girl at Cambridge, without meaning to and without understanding. But I was scared all the time. It took a long time to be able to enjoy myself, but I can now. If I could stop being ill, I would really enjoy myself.
Would you try to say some last words to a Korean audience? They say hello, like, to greet them.
What I want to say is how very sorry I am that I wasn't well enough to come, and that I fully intend to come to Korea. Yeah. I really would like to go. I went to Korea very briefly, really. I was on the way to China, and I got fascinated, but I wasn't there long enough. And it's always been there in my... And having read Pak 경li, even more I have a sense of the nature of it. Once you start, we've been talking all the time about work. Once you start reading Korean literature, you need to read another one, and then it fits into your map of the world better.
Yeah.
So
great. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. I can sense that you probably must be very, exhausted, for long hours conversation with me. I'm very thankful, I'm grateful to you for doing this with me.
Well, thank you. They are very good questions, as I
Thank you.